What did it really feel like to live in Britain? Not in theory, not in history books, but in the homes, streets, and shops of real people. From the post-war 1950s to the colourful 1970s, life in the UK changed beyond recognition. 3 decades, 1 generation, and a world transformed. Let's step back into the sounds, smells, and small details of everyday Britain, decade by decade. The 1950s, from ration books to respectability. The war was over, but the scars were still visible. Many houses were damaged, bomb sites still dotted the cities, and food rationing didn't finally end until 1954. But life was rebuilding, quietly, proudly, one pay packet at a time. Most families lived modestly. Coal fires heated one room, the rest stayed cold. You could draw your name on the frost that formed inside the windows by morning. Bath night meant hauling kettles to fill a tin tub in front of the fire. Privacy was a luxury and hot water a treat. People owned less, but valued more. Furniture was repaired, clothes were patched, and Sunday roast bones were boiled into soup for Monday dinner. There was no waste because there couldn't be. A loaf of bread cost around 9 old pence, about £1.10 today. A pint of milk was 4 pence, roughly 60 pence in today's money. And a pint of beer? 1 shilling and 3 pence, about £1.40 now. Nothing was cheap when you earned £9 a week, but you made it stretch. Shops were small, personal. You didn't just buy your food, you chatted while you waited. The grocer knew your family, the butcher knew your name, and children were trusted to run an errand with a paper bag of change. At home, families gathered around the radio, the light program, the Archers, or dance band music crackling through the speaker. Television sets were rare, black and white, and proudly placed like furniture. When the Queen's coronation aired in 1953, neighbors crowded into any house lucky enough to own a set, dozens of people squinting at a flickering screen, teacups in hand. Men wore hats, women wore curlers and aprons, and children played hopscotch and conkers in the street. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. People were polite, practical, and quietly proud to have come through the hardest years with something to show for it. The 1960s. Color, confidence, and change. If the 1950s were about recovery, the 1960s were about discovery. Britain was shaking off the dust of post-war life and stepping boldly into a brighter, louder age. For the first time, teenagers had their own voice and their own money. They bought records, clothes, and scooters, turning high streets into fashion runways and bedrooms into dance floors. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, The Who. Their music wasn't just sound, it was rebellion, optimism, and freedom all rolled into one. Wages were rising, nearly 40% higher than a decade before. The average working man now earned around £15 a week, enough to buy small luxuries, a washing machine, a black and white TV, maybe even a car. A pint of beer cost 1 shilling and 6 pence, about £1.70 today. A cinema ticket for 2 shillings, roughly £2.60. A modest new car, like the Ford Anglia, might set you back £500, about £9,000 in modern money. Still a dream for many, but a reachable one. Homes were transforming too. Bright carpets replaced linoleum floors. New wallpaper in wild floral prints covered entire rooms. Kitchens gleamed with chrome kettles and colorful appliances. People painted front doors bold red or blue, a small, proud rebellion against the grayness of the past. Supermarkets began to replace the old corner shops. Self-service was strange at first. People missed chatting with their butcher and grocer, but the convenience was undeniable. Shopping trolleys, fluorescent lighting, and packaged goods arrived, and with them, a taste of the future. The telly became the new hearth. Families gathered for Blue Peter, Coronation Street, and the Morecambe and Wise show. Nearly 80% of homes owned a set by the end of the decade. For the first time, the nation watched itself in real time, the moon landing, the Football World Cup, and even the Beatles' final concert, all seen live in living rooms across Britain. Fashion was revolution. Mary Quant's miniskirt shocked one generation and empowered another. Men's suits slimmed down, colors brightened, and hair got longer, on both men and women. Twiggy became the face of a new beauty ideal, modern, independent, unapologetic. But the change wasn't just on the surface. The 1960s redefined what was possible. Comprehensive schools opened doors for working-class children. The Equal Pay campaign gathered strength. Homosexuality was decriminalized in 1967, censorship began to crumble, and conversations once whispered were now spoken aloud. People felt hopeful, and, for once, truly modern. The grey fog of post-war Britain had lifted, replaced by electric guitars, patterned tights, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The 1970s. Hardship, humor, and heart. If the 60s were color and confidence, the 70s were contrast and confusion. Britain entered the decade on a high. New music, new fashion, new freedoms, but the optimism soon hit the hard wall of reality. Inflation soared. Prices doubled, then doubled again. Strikes shut down factories, trains, even power stations. The 3-day week meant blackouts, televisions cutting out mid-program, candles on the dinner table, and families huddled under blankets. Yet strangely, many remember those nights fondly. With the lights off, you talked more. Board games, cups of tea, laughter by torchlight, small joys that made the darkness warmer. At home, decor went wild. Brown, orange, mustard yellow, the holy trinity of 1970s color. Floral wallpaper fought with patterned carpets, and every kitchen seemed to have an avocado green fridge. The living room smelled of coal, toast, and maybe a whiff of tobacco. Central heating was spreading, but most homes still had one warm room. Kids would rush from bed to the gas fire, holding their school uniforms out to warm before dressing. Food was humble but hearty. Minced beef, beans on toast, shepherd's pie, and Vesta curry for the adventurous. Fridges were finally common, but microwaves were still futuristic. Friday night meant fish and chips, wrapped in paper, eaten on your lap while watching Top of the Pops. Speaking of which, music exploded again. From Bowie to T-Rex to Queen, British pop ruled the airwaves. Then came punk. Loud, raw, defiant. The Sex Pistols didn't just shock the establishment, they symbolized a generation's frustration. But it wasn't all rebellion. Community still mattered. The local pub was packed every weekend. Darts, dominoes, pints, and laughter thick enough to cut with a knife. There was a sense that everyone, despite the chaos, was in it together. Everyday costs tell the story. A pint of beer cost around 15 pence, about £1.50 today. A loaf of bread was 9 pence, a gallon of petrol about 35 pence. But an average weekly wage was £35, and that had to stretch to cover everything. Still, most managed. People budgeted, bartered, and borrowed from neighbors when they had to. Television had truly taken over. Only 3 channels, but unforgettable programs. Dad's Army, The Two Ronnies, Fawlty Towers. When Morecambe and Wise aired their Christmas special in 1977, over 28 million people watched. That's half the country, all laughing at the same joke, at the same time. When's the last time that happened? Socially, the decade reshaped Britain. Women entered the workforce in greater numbers. Immigration brought new food, music, and perspectives. There was tension, yes, but also integration. Curry houses, reggae records, and new voices joining the national story. The NHS stood strong through it all, stretched thin but still trusted. It wasn't perfect, but it was equal. For most, it was the safety net that made everything else bearable. By the end of the decade, Britain looked and felt utterly different from 1950. More diverse, more vocal, more uncertain, but still unmistakably British. From the ration book to the cassette tape, the coal scuttle to the color television, the Britain of 1950 to 1980 changed almost beyond recognition. 3 decades, 30 years, a single generation that lived through austerity, prosperity, and everything in between. And yet, some things never changed. The pride in a clean doorstep, the comfort of a hot cup of tea, the humor that made hardship bearable, and the quiet decency that held communities together. Maybe life was harder back then. Maybe it was simpler, but ask those who lived it and they'll tell you it was real. Every sound, every smell, every handshake meant something. So, which decade do you remember best? The tidy streets of the 50s? The music and freedom of the 60s? Or the warmth and struggle of the 70s? Let us know in the comments below. Because remembering isn't just looking back, it's remembering who we are.